Book 9. In the One-Eyed Giant's Cave. Odysseus, the great teller of tales, launched out on his story. Alcinous, majesty, shining among your island people, what a fine thing it is to listen to such a bard as we have here. The man sings like a god. The crown of life, I'd say. There's nothing better than when deep joy holds sway throughout the realm. Banqueters up and down the palace sit in ranks, enthralled to hear the bard, and before them all, the tables heaped with bread and meats. And drawing wine from a mixing bowl, the steward makes his rounds and keeps the wine cups flowing. This, to my mind, is the best that life can offer. But now, you're set on probing the bitter pains I've borne, so I'm to weep and grieve, it seems, still more. What should I go through first? What shall I say for last? What pains the gods have given me my share. Now let me begin by telling you my name, so you may know it well, and I in times to come, if I can escape the fatal day, will be your host, your sworn friend, though my home is far from here. I am Odysseus, son of Laertes, known to the world for every kind of craft. My fame has reached the skies. Sunny Ithaca is my home. Topper stands our sea mark, Mount Neriton's leafy ridges shimmering in the wind. Around her a ring of islands circles side by side. Dulichion, Sami, wooded Zacynthus too, but mine lies low and away, the farthest out to sea, rearing into the western dusk, while the others face the east and breaking day. Mine is a rugged land, but good for raising sons, and I myself, I know no sweeter sight on earth than a man's own native country. True enough, Calypso, the lustrous goddess, tried to hold me back, deep in her arching caverns, craving me for a husband. So did Circe, holding me just as warmly in her halls, the bewitching queen of Aea, keen to have me too. But they never won the heart inside me, never. So nothing is as sweet as a man's own country, his own parents, even though he settled down in some luxurious house off in a foreign land and far from those who bore him. No more. Come, let me tell you about the voyage fraught with hardship Zeus inflicted on me, homeward bound from Troy. The wind drove me out of Ilium onto Ismarus, the Cicones stronghold. There I sacked the city, killed the men, but as for the wives and plunder, that rich haul we dragged away from the place. We shared it round so no one, not on my account, would go deprived of his fair share of spoils. Then I urged them to cut and run, set sail, but would they listen? Not those mutinous fools. There was too much wine to spill, too many sheep to slaughter down along the beach, and shambling longhorn cattle. And all the while the Cicones sought out other Cicones, called for help from their neighbors living inland, a larger force and stronger soldiers too, skilled hands at fighting men from chariots, skilled, when a crisis broke, to fight on foot. Out of the morning mist they came against us, packed as the leaves and spears that flower forth in spring, and Zeus presented us with disaster, me and my comrades doomed to suffer blow on mortal blow. Lining up, both armies battled it out against our swift ships. Both raked against each other with hurtling bronze lances. Long as morning rose, and the blessed day grew stronger, we stood and fought them off, massed as they were, but then, when the sun wheeled past the hour for unyoking oxen, the Cicones broke our line and beat us down at last. Out of each ship, 6 men-at-arms were killed. The rest of us rode away from certain doom. From there we sailed on, glad to escape our death, yet sick at heart for the dear companions we had lost. But I would not let our rolling ship set sail until the crews had raised the triple cry, saluting each poor comrade cut down by the fierce Cicones on the plain. Now Zeus, who masses the storm clouds, hit the fleet with the north wind, a howling demonic gale shrouding over in the thunderheads the earth and sea at once. And night swept down from the sky, and the ships went plunging headlong on, our sails slashed to rags by the hurricane's blast. We struck them. Cringing at death, we rowed our ships to the nearest shoreline, pulled with all our power. There for 2 nights, 2 days, we lay by, no let up, eating our hearts out, bent with pain and bone tired. When dawn with her lovely locks brought on the 3rd day, then stepping the masts and hoisting white sails high, we lounged at the oarlocks, letting wind and helmsman keep us true on course. And now at long last, I might have reached my native land unscathed. But just as I doubled Malia's cape, a tide rip and the north wind drove me way off course, careering past Cythera. 9 whole days I was borne along by rough, deadly winds on the fish-infested sea. Then on the 10th our squadron reached the land of the lotus eaters, People eat the lotus, mellow fruit and flower. We disembarked on the coast, drew water there, and crewmen snatched the meal by the swift ships. Once we'd had our fill of food and drink, I sent a detail ahead. 2 men picked and a third, a runner, to scout out who might live there. Men like us, perhaps, who live on bread. So off they went, and soon enough they mingled among the natives. Lotus eaters who had no notion of killing my companions, not at all. They simply gave them the lotus to taste instead. Any crewman who ate the lotus, the honey-sweet fruit, lost all desire to send a message back, much less return. Their only wish to linger there were the lotus eaters, grazing on lotus. All memory of the journey home dissolved forever. But I brought them back to the hollow ships, and streaming tears I forced them, hauled them under the rowing benches, lashed them fast, and shouted out commands to my other steady comrades. Quick, no time to lose, embark in the racing ships. So none could eat the lotus, forget the voyage home. They swung aboard at once. They sat to the oars in ranks, and in rhythm trained the water white with stroke on stroke. From there we sailed on, our spirits now at a low ebb, and reached the land of the high and mighty Cyclops. Lawless brutes who trust so to the everlasting gods they never plant with their own hands or plow the soil. Unsown, unplowed, the earth teems with all they need, wheat, barley, and vines, swelled by the rains of Zeus to yield a big full-bodied wine from clustered grapes. They have no meeting place for council, no laws either. No. Up on the mountain peaks they live in arching caverns, each a law to himself, ruling his wives and children, not a care in the world for any neighbor. Now, a level island stretches flat across the harbor, not close inshore to the Cyclops' coast, not too far out, thick with woods where the wild goats breed by hundreds. No trampling of men to start them from their lairs, no hunters roughing it out on the woody ridges, stalking quarry, ever raid their haven. No flocks browse, no plowlands roll with wheat, unplowed, unsown forever, empty of humankind. The island just feeds droves of bleeding goats. For the Cyclops have no ships with crimson prows, no shipwrights there to build them good trim craft that could sail them out to foreign ports of call, as most men risk the seas to trade with other men. Such artisans would have made this island too a decent place to live in. No mean spot. It could bear you any crop you like in season. The water meadows along the low foaming shore run soft and moist, and your vines would never flag. The land's clear for plowing. Harvest on harvest, the man could reap a healthy stand of grain. The subsoil's dark and rich. There's a snug, deep water harbor there, what's more. No need for mooring gear, no anchor stones to heave, no cables to make fast. Just beat your keels right out the days till your shipmate's spirit stirs for open sea and a fair wind blows. And last, at the harbor's head, there's a spring that rushes fresh from beneath the cave, and black poplars flourish round its mouth. Well, here we landed, and surely a god steered us in through the pitch-black night. Not that he ever showed himself, with thick fog swirling around the ships, the moon wrapped in clouds, and not a glimmer stealing through that gloom. Not one of us glimpsed the island, scanning hard, or the long-lost combers rolling us slowly toward the coast, not till our ships had run their keels ashore. Beaching our vessel smoothly, striking sail, the crew swung out on the low shelving sand, and there we fell asleep, awaiting dawn's first light. When young dawn, with her rose-red fingers shown us once more, we all turned out, intrigued to tour the island. The local nymphs, the daughters of Zeus himself, flushed mountain goats so the crews could make their meal. Quickly we fetched our curved bows and hunting spears from the ships, and splitting up into 3 bands, we started shooting, and soon enough some god had sent us bags of game to warm our hearts. A dozen vessels sailed in my command, and to each crew 9 goats were shared out, and mine alone took 10. Then all day long, till the sun went down, we sat and feasted well on sides of meat and rounds of heady wine. The good red stock in our vessel's holds had not run out. There was still plenty left. The men had carried off a generous store in jars when we stormed and sacked the Sicyones' holy city. Now we stared across at the Cyclops' shore, so near we could even see their smoke, hear their voices, their bleating sheep and goats. And then when the sun had set and night came on, we lay down and slept at the water's shelving edge. When young dawn with her rose-red fingers shone once more, I called a muster briskly, commanding all the hands. The rest of you stay here, my friends in arms. I'll go across with my own ship and crew and probe the natives living over there. What are they? Violent, savage, lawless? Or friendly to strangers, God-fearing men? With that, I boarded ship and told the crew to embark at once and cast off cables quickly. They swung aboard. They sat to the oars in ranks and in rhythm churned the water white with stroke on stroke. But as soon as we reached the coast I mentioned, no long trip, we spied a cavern just at the shore, gaping above the surf, towering, overgrown with laurel. And here big flocks, sheep and goats, were stalled to spend the nights, and around its mouth a yard was walled up, with quarried boulders sunk deep in the earth and enormous pines and oak trees looming darkly. Here was a giant's lair, in fact, who always pastured his sheep flocks far afield and never mixed with others. A grim loner, dead set in his own lawless ways. Here was a piece of work, by God, a monster built like no mortal who ever supped on bread. No, like a shaggy peak, I'd say, a man-mountain, rearing head and shoulders over the world. Now then, I told most of my good trusty crew to wait, to sit tight by the ship and guard her well, while I picked out my dozen finest fighters, and off I went. But I took a skin of wine along, the ruddy, irresistible wine that Marin gave me once. Euanthes' son, a priest of Apollo, lord of Ismarus, because we'd rescued him, his wife and children, reverent as we were. He lived, you see, in Apollo's holy grove. And so in return he gave me splendid gifts. He handed me 7 bars of well-wrought gold, a mixing bowl of solid silver, then this wine. He drew it off in generous wine jars, 12 in all unmixed, and such a bouquet, a drink fit for the gods. No maid or man of his household knew that secret store, only himself, his loving wife, and a single servant. Whenever they drank the deep red mellow vintage, 20 cups of water he'd stir in one of wine, and what an aroma wafted from the bowl. What magic, what a godsend. No joy in holding back when that was poured. Filling a great goatskin now, I took this wine, provisions too in a leather sack. A sudden foreboding told my fighting spirit I'd soon come up against some giant clad in power like armor plates, a savage deaf to justice, blind to law. Our party quickly made its way to his cave, but we failed to find our host himself inside. He was off in his pasture, ranging his sleek flocks. So we explored his den, gazing wide-eyed at it all. The large flat racks loaded with drying cheeses, the folds crowded with young lambs and kids, split into 3 groups. Here the spring-born, here mid-yearlings, here the fresh sucklings off to the side. Each sort was penned apart, and all his vessels, pails, and hammered buckets he used for milking, were brimming full with whey. From the start my comrades pressed me, pleading hard. Let's make away with the cheeses, then come back. Hurry, drive the lambs and kids from the pens to our swift ship, put out to sea at once. But I would not give way. And how much better it would have been, not till I saw him, saw what gifts he'd give. But he proved no lovely sight to my companions. There we built a fire, set our hands on the cheeses, offered some to the gods, and ate the bulk ourselves, and settled down inside awaiting his return. And back he came from pasture late in the day, herding his flocks home and lugging a huge load of good dry logs to fuel his fire at supper. He flung them down in the cave, a jolting crash. We scuttled in panic into the deepest dark recess. And next he drove his sleek flocks into the open vault, and he'd milk at least, but he left the males outside, rams and billy goats out in the high-walled yard. Then to close his door, he hoisted overhead a tremendous, massive slab. No 22 wagons, rugged and four-wheeled, could budge that boulder off the ground, I tell you. Such an immense stone the monster wedged to block his cave. Then down he squatted to milk his sheep and bleating goats, each in order, and put a seckling underneath each dam. And half of the fresh white milk he curdled quickly, set it aside in wicker racks to press for cheese. The other half let stand in pails and buckets, ready to hand to wash his supper down. As soon as he briskly finished all his chores, he lit his fire and spied us in the blaze, and "Strangers," he thundered out, "now who are you? Where did you sail from? Over the running sea lanes? Out on a trading spree or roving the waves like pirates, sea wolves raiding at will, who risk their lives to plunder other men?" The hearts inside us shook, terrified by his rumbling voice and monstrous hulk. Nevertheless, I found the nerve to answer firmly. "Men of Achaea, we are, and bound now from Troy. Driven far off course by the warring winds, over the vast gulf of the sea, battling home on a strange tack, a route that's off the map, and so we've come to you. So it must Please, King Zeus's plotting heart. We're glad to say we're men of Atrides, Agamemnon, whose fame is the proudest thing on the earth these days. So great a city he sacked, with multitudes he killed. But since we've chanced on you, we're at your knees in hopes of a warm welcome, even a guest gift. The sort that hosts give strangers. That's the custom. Respect the gods, my friend. We're suppliants at your mercy. Zeus of the strangers guards all guests and suppliants. Strangers are sacred. Zeus will avenge their rights. Stranger, he grumbled back from his brutal heart. You must be a fool, stranger, come from nowhere, telling me to fear the gods or avoid their wrath. We Cyclops never blink at Zeus and Zeus's shield of storm and thunder, or any other blessed god. We got more force by far. I'd never spare you in fear of Zeus's hatred, you or your comrades here, unless I had the urge. But tell me, where did you moor your sturdy ship when you arrived? Up the coast or close in? I'd just like to know. So he laid his trap, but he never caught me, no. Wise to the world, I shot back in my crafty way. My ship? Poseidon, god of the earthquake, smashed my ship. He drove it against the rocks at your island's far cape. He dashed it against a cliff as the winds rode us in. I and the men you see escaped the sudden death. Not a word in reply to that, the ruthless brute. Lurching up, he lunged out with his hands towards my men, and snatching two at once, rapping them on the ground, he knocked them dead like pups. Their brains gushed out all over, soaked the floor. Ripping them limb from limb to fix his meal, he bolted them down like a mountain lion, left no scrap, devoured entrails, flesh and bones, marrow and all. We flung our arms to Zeus, we wept and cried aloud, looking on at his grisly work, paralyzed, appalled. But once the Cyclops had stuffed his enormous gut with human flesh, washing it down with raw milk, he slept in his cave, stretched out along his flocks. And I, with my fighting heart, I thought at first to steal up to him, draw the sharp sword at my hip, and stab his chest where the midriff packs the liver. I groped for the fatal spot, but a fresh thought held me back. There at a stroke we'd finish off ourselves as well. How could we with our bare hands heave back the slab he set to block his cavern's gaping maw? So we lay there groaning, waiting dawn's first light. When young Dawn with her rose-red fingers shone once more, the monster relit his fire and milked his handsome ewes, each in order, putting a suckling underneath each dam, and as soon as he'd briskly finished all his chores, he snatched up two more men and fixed his meal. Well fed, he drove his fat sheep from the cave, lightly lifting the huge door slab up and away, then slipped it back in place as a hunter flips the lid of his quiver shut. Piercing whistles, turning his flocks to the hills, he left me there, the heart inside me brooding on revenge. How could I pay him back? Would Athena give me glory? Here was the plan that struck my mind as best. The Cyclops' great club, there it lay by the pens, olive wood full of sap. He'd lopped it off to brandish once it dried. Looking it over, we judged it big enough to be the mast of a pitch-black ship with her 20 oars, a freighter broad in the beam that plows through miles of sea. So long, so thick it bulked before our eyes. Well, flanking it now, I chopped off a fathom's length, rolled it to comrades, told them to plane it down, and they made the clubs smooth as I bent and shaved the tip to a stabbing point. I turned it over the blazing fire to char it good and hard, and then hid it well, buried deep under the dung that littered the cavern's floor in thick, wet clumps. And now I ordered my shipmates all to cast lots, who would brave it out with me to hoist our stake and grind it into his eye when sleep had overcome him. Luck of the draw. I got the very ones I would have picked myself, 4 good men, and I in the lead made 5. Nightfall brought him back, herding his woolly sheep, and he quickly drove the sleek flock into the vaulted cavern, rams and all. None left outside in the walled yard, his own idea, perhaps, or God led him on. Then he hoisted the huge slab to block the door and squatted to milk his sheep and bleating goats, each in order, putting a suckling underneath each dam, and as soon as he'd briskly finished all his chores, he snatched up 2 more men and fixed his meal. By this time I lifted a carved wooden bowl, brimful of my ruddy wine, and went right up to the Cyclops, enticing. Here, Cyclops, try this wine, to top off the banquet of human flesh you've bolted down. Judge for yourself what stock our ship had stored. I brought it here to make you a fine libation, hoping you would pity me, Cyclops, send me home, but your rages are insufferable. You barbarian, how can any man on earth come visit you after this? What you've done outrages all that's right." At that he seized the bowl and tossed it off, and the heady wine pleased him immensely. More. He demanded a second bowl. "A hearty helping, and tell me your name now quickly, so I can hand my guest a gift to warm his heart." "Our soil yields the Cyclops powerful, full-bodied wine, and the rains from Zeus build its strength. But this is nectar, ambrosia. This flows from heaven." So he declared. I poured him another fiery bowl. 3 bowls I brimmed, and 3 he drank to the last drop, the fool, and then, when the wine was swirling round his brain, I approached my host with a cordial, winning word. "So you asked me the name I'm known by, Cyclops. I will tell you. But you must give me a guest gift as you've promised. Nobody. That's my name, Nobody. So my mother and father call me, all my friends." But he boomed back at me from his ruthless heart. "Nobody. I'll eat Nobody last of all his friends. I'll eat the others first. That's my gift to you." With that, he toppled over, sprawled full length, flat on his back, and lay there, his massive neck slumping to one side, and sleep that conquers all overwhelmed him now, as wine came spurting, flooding up from his gullet with chunks of human flesh. He vomited, blind drunk. Now at last I thrust our steak in a bed of embers to get it red hot, and rallied all my comrades. Courage, no panic, no one hang back now. Green as it was, just as the olive steak was about to catch fire, the glow terrific, yes. I dragged it from the flames, my men clustering round as some god breathed enormous courage through us all. Hoisting high that olive stake with its stabbing point straight into the monster's eye, they rammed it hard. I drove my weight on it from above and bored it home as a shipwright bores his beam with a shipwright's drill, that men below, whipping the straps back and forth, whirl, and the drill keeps twisting faster, never stopping. So we seized our stake with its fiery tip and bored it round and round in the giant's eye, till blood came boiling up around that smoking shaft, and the hot blast singed his brow and eyelids round the core, and the broiling eyeball burst. Its crackling roots blazed and hissed. As a blacksmith plunges a glowing axe or adds in an ice-cold bath, and the metal screeches steam, and its temper hardens, that's the iron's strength. So the eye of Cyclops sizzled round that stake. He loosed a hideous roar. The rock walls echoed round, and we scuttled back in terror. The monster wrenched the spike from his eye, and out it came with a red geyser of blood. He flung it aside with frantic hands, and mad with pain he bellowed out for help from his neighbor Cyclops, living round about in caves on wind-swept crags. Hearing his cries, they lumbered up from every side, and hulking round his cavern asked what ailed him. "What, Polyphemus, what in the world's the trouble? Roaring out in the god-sent night to rob us of our sleep? Surely no one's rustling your flocks against your will. Surely no one's trying to kill you now by fraud or force." "Nobody, friends," Polyphemus bellowed back from his cave. "Nobody's killing me now by fraud and not by force." "If you're alone," his friends boomed back at once, "and nobody's trying to overpower you now, look, it must be a plague sent here by mighty Zeus, and there's no escape from that. You better pray to your father, Lord Poseidon." They lumbered off, but laughter filled my heart to think how Nobody's name, my great cunning stroke, had duped them one and all. But the Cyclops there, still groaning, racked with agony, groped around for the huge slab, and heaving it from the doorway, down he sat in the cave's mouth, his arms spread wide, hoping to catch a comrade stealing out with sheep. Such a blithering fool he took me for, but I was already plotting. What was the best way out? How could I find escape from death for my crew, myself as well? My wits kept weaving cunning schemes. Life at stake, monstrous death staring us in the face, till this plan struck my mind as best. That flock, those well-fed rams with their splendid thick fleece, sturdy, handsome beasts sporting their dark weight of wool. I lashed them abreast, quietly, twisting the willow twigs the Cyclops slept on. Giant, lawless brute, I took them 3 by 3. Each ram in the middle bore a man, while the 2 rams either side would shield him well. So 3 beasts to bear each man, but as for myself, there was one bellwether ram, the prize of all the flock, and clutching him by his back, tucked up under his shaggy belly, there I hung, face upward. Both ends locked in his marvelous deep fleece, clinging for dear life, my spirit steeled, enduring. So we held on desperate, waiting for dawn's first light. As soon as young dawn with her rose-red fingers shone once more, the rams went rumbling out of the cave toward pasture. The ewes kept bleating round the pens, unmilked, their udders about to burst. Their master now, heaving in torment, felt the back of each animal, halting before him here, but the idiot never sensed my men were trussed up under their thick, fleecy ribs. And last of them all came my great ram now, striding out, weighed down with the dense wool and my deep plots. Stroking him gently, powerful Polyphemus murmured, "Dear old ram, why last of the flock to quit the cave? In the good old days you'd never lag behind the rest, you with your long marching strides, first by far of the flock to graze the fresh young grasses, first by far to reach the rippling streams, first to turn back home, keen for your fold when the night comes on, but now you're last of all. And why? Sick at heart for your master's eye, that coward gouged out with his wicked crew, only after he'd stunned my wits with wine, that nobody, who's not escaped his death, I swear not yet. Oh, if only you thought like me, had words like me to tell me where that scoundrel is cringing from my rage, I'd smash him against the ground, I'd spill his brains, flooding across my cave, and that would ease my heart of the pains that good-for-nothing nobody made me suffer." And with that threat, he let my ram go free outside. But as soon as we got 1 foot past the cave and courtyard, first I loosed myself from the ram and loosed my men. Then quickly glancing back again and again, we drove our flock, good plump beasts with their long shanks, straight to the ship, and a welcome sight we were to loyal comrades, we who'd escaped our deaths. But for all the rest, they broke down and wailed. I cut it short. I stopped each shipmate's cries, my head tossing, brows frowning, silent signals to hurry. Tumble our fleecy herd on board, launch out on the open sea. They swung aboard. They sat to the oars in ranks, and in rhythm churned the water white with stroke on stroke. But once offshore, as far as a man's shout can carry, I called back to the Cyclops, stinging taunts. So Cyclops, snowy coward it was whose crew you bent to devour there in your vaulted cave, you with your brute force. Your filthy crimes came down on your own head, you shameless cannibal, daring to eat your guests in your own house. So Zeus and the other gods have paid you back. That made the rage of the monster boil over. Ripping off the peak of a towering crag, he heaved it so hard the boulder landed just in front of our dark prow, and a huge swell reared up as the rock went plunging under, a tidal wave from the open sea. The sudden backwash drove us landward again, forcing us close inshore, but grabbing a long pole, I thrust us off and away, tossing my head for dear life, signaling crews to put their backs in the oars, escape grim death. They threw themselves in labor, rowed on fast, but once we'd plowed the breakers twice as far, I began to taunt the Cyclops. Men around me trying to check me, calm me, left and right. So headstrong, why? Why rile the beast again? That rocky flung in the sea just now, hurling our ship to shore once more, we thought we'd die on the spot. If he caught a sound from one of us, just a moan, he would have crushed our heads and ship timbers with one heave of another flashing jagged rock. Good God, the brute can throw. So they begged, but they could not bring my fighting spirit round. I called back with another burst of anger. Cyclops, if any man on the face of the earth should ask you who blinded you, shamed you so, say Odysseus. Raider of cities, he gouged out your eye. Laertes' son who makes his home in Ithaca. So I vaunted, and he groaned back in answer. Oh, no. That prophecy years ago, it all comes home to me with a vengeance now. We once had a prophet here, a great tall man, Telemus, Eurymachus' son, a master of reading signs, who grew old in his trade among his fellow Cyclops. All this, he warned me, would come to pass someday, that I'd be blinded here at the hands of one Odysseus. But I always looked for a handsome giant man to cross my path, some fighter clad in power like armor plate, but now, look what a dwarf, a spineless good-for-nothing, stuns me with wine, then gouges out my eye. Come here, Odysseus, let me give you a guest gift and urge Poseidon, the earthquake god, to speed you home. I am his son, and he claims to be my father true, and he himself will heal me if he pleases. No other blessed god, no man can do the work. Heal you? Here was my parting shot. Would to God I strip you of life and breath and ship you down to the house of death, as surely as no one will ever heal your eye, not even your earthquake god himself. But at that he bellowed out to Lord Poseidon, thrusting his arms to the starry skies, and prayed, "Hear me, Poseidon, god of the sea-blue mane who rocks the earth. If I really am your son and you claim to be my father, come, grant that Odysseus, raider of cities, Laertes' son who makes his home in Ithaca, never reaches home. Or if he's fated to see his people once again and reach his well-built house in his own native country, let him come home late and come a broken man, all shipmates lost, alone in a stranger's ship, and let him find a world of pain at home." So he prayed, and the god of the sea-blue mane, Poseidon, heard his prayer. The monster suddenly hoisted a boulder, far larger, wheeled and heaved it, putting his weight behind it. Massive strength, and the boulder crashed close, landing just in the wake of our dark stern, just failing to graze the rudder's bladed edge. A huge swell reared up as the rock went plunging under, yes, and the tidal breaker drove us out to our island's far shore, where all my well-decked ships lay moored, clustered, waiting, and huddled around them. Crewmen sat in anguish waiting, chafing for our return. We beached our vessel hard ashore on the sand and swung out in the frothing surf ourselves, and herding Cyclops' sheep from our deep holds, we shared them round so no one, not on my account, would go deprived of his fair share of spoils. But the splendid ram, as we meted out the flocks, my friends in arms, made him my prize of honor, mine alone, and I slaughtered him on the beach and burned his thighs to Cronus' mighty son, Zeus of the thundercloud who rules the world. But my sacrifices failed to move the god. Zeus was still obsessed with plans to destroy my entire oar-swept fleet and loyal crew of comrades. Now all day long till the sun went down, we sat and feasted on sides of meat and heady wine. Then when the sun had set and night came on, we lay down and slept at the water's shelving edge. When young Dawn, with her rose-red fingers, shone once more, I roused the men straight away, ordering all crews to man the ships and cast off cables quickly. They swung aboard at once. They sat to the oars in ranks, and in rhythm churned the water, white with stroke on stroke. And from there we sailed on, glad to escape our death, yet sick at heart for the comrades we had lost. Book 10. The Bewitching Queen of Aea. We reached the Aeolian island next, the home of Aeolus, Hippolytus' son, beloved by the gods who never die. A great floating island it was, and round it all, huge ramparts rose of indestructible bronze, and sheer rock cliffs shoot up from sea to sky. The king had sired 12 children within his halls, 6 daughters and 6 sons in the lusty prime of youth, so he gave his daughters as wives to his 6 sons. Seated beside their dear father and doting mother, with delicacies aplenty spread before them, they feast on forever. All day long the halls breathe the savor of roasted meats, and echo round to the low moan of blowing pipes, and all night long, each one by his faithful mate, they sleep under soft-piled rugs, uncorded bedsteads. To the city of theirs we came, their splendid palace, and Aeolus hosted me one entire month. He pressed me for news of Troy and the Argive ships, and how we sailed for home, and I told him the whole long story first to last. And then when I begged him to send me on my way, he denied me nothing. He went about my passage. He gave me a sack, the skin of a full-grown ox, binding inside the winds that howl from every quarter, for Zeus had made that king the master of all the winds, with power to calm them down or rouse them as he pleased. Aeolus stowed the sack inside my holds, lashed so fast with a burnished silver cord, not even a slight puff could slip past that knot. Yet he set the west wind free to blow us on our way and waft our squadron home. But his plan was bound to fail. Yes, our own reckless folly swept us on to ruin. 9 whole days we sailed, 9 nights non-stop. On the 10th, our own land hove into sight at last. We were so close we could see men tending fires. But now an enticing sleep came upon me. Bone weary from working the vessel's sheet myself, no let up, never trusting the ropes to any other mate, the faster to journey back to native land. But the crews began to mutter among themselves, Sure, I was hauling troves of gold and silver home, the gifts of open-hearted Aeolus, Hippotas' son. The old story, one man glanced at another, grumbling, "Look at our captain's luck, so loved by the world, so prized at every landfall, every port of call. Heaps of lovely plunder he hauls home from Troy, while we who went through slogging just as hard, we go home empty-handed. Now this Aeolus loads him down with treasure, favoritism, friend to friend. Hurry, let's see what loot is in that sack. How much gold and silver? Break it open now." A fatal plan, but it won my shipmates over. They loosed the sack and all the winds burst out, and a sudden squall struck and swept us back to sea, wailing in tears, far from our own native land. And I woke up with a start, my spirit churning. Should I leap over the side and drown at once, or grit my teeth and bear it, stay among the living? I bore it all, held firm, hiding my face, clinging tight to the decks, while heavy squalls blasted our squadron back, again to Aeolus' island, shipmates groaning hard. We disembarked on the coast, drew water there, and crewmen snatched a meal by the swift ships. Once we'd had our fill of food and drink, I took a shipmate along with me, a herald too, and approached King Aeolus' famous halls, and here we found him feasting beside his wife and many children. Reaching the doorposts at the threshold, down we sat, but our hosts, amazed to see us, only shouted questions. "Back again, Odysseus? Why? Some blustering god attacked you? Surely we launched you well. We sped you on your way to your own land and house, or any place you pleased." So they taunted, and I replied in deep despair, "A mutinous crew undid me, that and a cruel sleep. Set it to rights, my friends, you have the power." So I pleaded, gentle, humble appeals, but our hosts turned silent, hushed, and the father broke forth with an ultimatum. "Away from my island, fast, most cursed man alive. It's a crime to host a man or speed him on his way when the blessed, deathless gods despise him so. Crawling back like this, it proves the mortals hate you. Out. Get out." Grown as I did, his curses drove me from his halls, and from there we pulled away with heavy hearts, with the crew's spirit broken under the oars' labor, thanks to our own folly, no favoring wind in sight. 6 whole days we rode, 6 nights non-stop. On the 7th day we raised the Laestrygonian land, Polyphemus heights, where the craggy ford of Lamus rises, where shepherd calls to shepherd as one drives in his flock, the other drives his out, and he calls back in answer. Where a man who never sleeps could rake in double wages, one for herding cattle, one for pasturing fleecy sheep. The nightfall and the sunrise march so close together. We entered a fine harbor there, all walled around by a great unbroken sweep of a skyscraping cliff and 2 steep headlands, fronting each other, close around the mouth so the passage in is cramped. Here the rest of my rolling squadron steered, right into the gaping cove and moored tightly, prow by prow. Never a swell there, big or small. A milk-white calm spreads all around the place. But I alone anchored my black ship outside, well clear of the harbor's jaws. I tied her fast to a cliffside with a cable. I scaled its rock face to look out on its crest, but glimpsed no trace of the work of man or beast from there. All I spied was a plume of smoke drifting off the land. So I sent some crew ahead to learn who lived there. Men like us, perhaps, who live on bread? 2 good mates I chose, and a third to run the news. They disembarked and set out on a beaten trail, the wagons used for hauling timber down to town from the mountain heights above. And before the walls they met a girl drawing water. Antiphates' strapping daughter, king of the Laestrygonians. She'd come down to a clear running spring, Odyssey, where the local people came to fill their pails. My shipmates clustered round her, asking questions. Who was the king of the realm? Who ruled the natives here? She waved at once to her father's high-roofed halls. They entered the sumptuous palace, found his wife inside, a woman huge as a mountain crag, who filled them all with horror. Straightway she summoned royal Antiphates from assembly, her husband, who prepared my crew a barbarous welcome. Snatching one of my men, he tore him up for dinner. The other two sprang free and reached the ships. But the king let loose a howling through the town that brought tremendous Laestrygonians swarming up from every side, hundreds, not like men, like giants. Down from the cliffs they flung great rocks a man could hardly hoist, and a ghastly shattering din rose up from all the ships, men in their death cries, hulls smashed to splinters. They speared the crews like fish and whisked them home to make their grisly meal. But while they killed them off in the harbor depths, I pulled the sword from beside my hip and hacked away at the ropes that moored my blue, proud ship of war, and shouted rapid orders at my shipmates. Put your backs in the oars, now row or die. In terror of death they ripped the swells all as one, and what a joy as we darted out toward open sea, clear of those beetling cliffs, my ship alone. But the rest went down en masse, our squadron sank. From there we sailed on, glad to escape our death, yet sick at heart for the dear companions we had lost. We reached the Aeaean island next, home of Circe, the nymph with lovely braids. An awesome power, too, who can speak with human voice. The true sister of murderous-minded Aedes. Both were bred by the sun who lights our lives. Their mother was Circe, a child the ocean bore. We brought our ship to port without a sound, as God eased her into a harbor safe and snug. And for 2 days and 2 nights we lay by there, eating our hearts out, bent with pain and bone tired. When dawn with her lovely locks brought on the 3rd day, at last I took my spear and my sharp sword again, rushed up from the ship to find a lookout point, hoping to glimpse some sign of human labor, catch some human voices. I scaled a commanding crag, and scanning hard, I could just make out some smoke from Circe's halls, drifting up from the broad terrain through brush and woods. Mulling it over, I thought I'd scout the ground, that fire aglow in the smoke. I saw it true. But soon enough, this seemed the better plan. I'd go back to shore and the swift ship first, feed the men, then send them out for scouting. I was well on my way down, nearing our ship, when a god took pity on me, wandering all alone. He sent me a big stag with high branching antlers right across my path. The sun's heat forced him down from his forest range to drink at a river's banks, just bounding out of the timber when I hit him square in the backbone, halfway down the spine. My bronze spear went punching clean through. He dropped in the dust, groaning, gasping out of his breath. Treading on him, I wrenched my bronze spear from the wound, left it there on the ground, and snapping off some twigs and creepers, twisted a rope about a fathom long. I braided it tight, hand over hand, and lashed the 4 hocks of that magnificent beast. Loaded round my neck, I lugged him toward the ship. Trudging, propped on my spear, no way to sling him over his shoulder, steadying him with one free arm. The kill was so immense. I flung him down by the hull and roused the men, going up to them all with a word to lift their spirits. Listen to me, my comrades, brothers in hardship. We won't go down to the house of death, not yet. Not till our day arrives. Up with you, look. But there's still some meat and drink in our good ship. Put our minds on food, why die of hunger here? My hearty urging brought them round at once. Heads came up from cloaks, and there by the barren sea they gazed at the stag, their eyes wide, my noble trophy. Once they'd looked their fill and warmed their hearts, they washed their hands and prepared a splendid meal. Now all day long, till the sun went down, we sat and feasted on sides of meat and seasoned wine. Then when the sun had set and night came on, we lay down and slept at the water's shelving edge. When young dawn with her rose-red fingers shone once more, I called a muster quickly, informing all the crew. Listen to me, my comrades, brothers in hardship. We can't tell east from west, the dawn from the dusk, nor where the sun that lights our lives goes under earth, nor where it rises. We must think of a plan at once, some cunning stroke. I doubt there's one still left. I scaled a commanding crag, and from that height surveyed an entire island, ringed like a crown by endless wastes of sea. But the land itself lies low, and I did see smoke drifting up from its heart through thick brush and woods. My message broke their spirit as they recalled the gruesome work of the Laestrygonian king Antiphates and the hardy cannibal Cyclops thirsting for our blood. They burst into cries, wailing, streaming live tears that gained us nothing. What good can come from grief? And so, numbering off my band band of men-at-arms into 2 platoons. I assigned them each a leader. I took one, and Lord Eurylochus took the other. We quickly shook lots in a bronze helmet. The lot of brave Eurylochus leapt out first. So he moved off with his 22 comrades, weeping, leaving us behind in tears as well. Deep in the wooded glens they came on Circe's palace, built of dressed stone on a cleared rise of land. Mountain wolves and lions were roaming round the grounds. She'd bewitched them herself. She gave them magic drugs. But they wouldn't attack my men. They just came pawing up around them, fawning, swishing their long tails, eager as hounds that fawn around their master, coming home from a feast, who always brings back scraps to calm them down. So they came nuzzling round my men, lions, wolves with big powerful claws, and the men cringed in fear at the sight of those strange ferocious beasts. But still they paused at her doors, the nymph with lovely braids, Circe, and deep inside they heard her singing, lifting her spellbinding voice as she glided back and forth at her great immortal loom, her enchanting web a shimmering glory only goddesses can weave. Polites, captain of armies, took command, the closest, most devoted man I had. Friends, there's something inside, plying a great loom, and how she sings, enthralling. The whole house is echoing to her song. Goddess or woman, let's call out to her now. So we urged, and the men called out and hailed her. She opened her gleaming doors at once and stepped forth, inviting them all in, and in they went, all innocents. Only Eurylochus stayed behind. He sensed the trap. She ushered them in to sit on high-backed chairs, and she mixed them a potion, cheese, barley, and pale honey mulled in Pramnian wine. But into the brew she stirred her wicked drugs, to wipe from their memories any thought of home. Once they drained the bowl she filled, suddenly she struck with her wand, drove them into her pigsties, all of them bristling into swine with grunts, snouts, even their bodies. Yes, and only the men's minds stayed steadfast as before. So off they went to their pens, sobbing, squealing, as Circe flung them acorns, kernel nuts, and mast, common fodder for hogs that root and roll in mud. Back, Eurylochus ran to our swift black ship to tell the disaster our poor friends had faced. But try as he might, he couldn't get a word out. Numbing sorrow had stunned the man to silence. Tears welled in his eyes, his heart possessed by grief. We assailed him with questions, all at our wits' end, till at last he could recount the fate our friends had met. Off we went through the brush, captain, as you commanded. Deep in the wooded glens we came on Circe's palace, built of dressed stone on a cleared rise of land. Someone inside was plying a great loom, and how she sang in a high, clear voice. Goddess or woman, we called out and hailed her. She opened her gleaming doors at once and stepped forth, inviting us all in, and in we went, all innocents. But I stayed behind. I sensed the trap. Suddenly all vanished, blotted out. Not one face showed again, though I sat there keeping watch a good long time. At that report, I slung the hefty bronze blade of my silver-studded sword around my shoulder, slung my bow on too, and told our comrade, "Lead me back by the same way that you came." And he flung both arms round my knees and pleaded, begging with his tears and winging words, "Don't force me back there, Captain King. Leave me here on the spot. You will never return yourself, I swear. You'll never bring back a single man alive. Quick, cut and run with the rest of us here. We can still escape the fatal day." But I shot back, "Eurylochus, stay right here, eating, drinking, safe by the black ship. I must be off. Necessity drives me on." Leaving the ship and shore, I headed inland, clambering up through hushed, entrancing glades until, as I was nearing the halls of Circe, skilled in spells, approaching her palace, Hermes, god of the golden wand, crossed my path, and he looked for all the world like a young man sporting his first beard, just in the prime and warm pride of youth, and grasped me by the hand and asked me kindly, "Where are you going now, my unlucky friend? Trekking over the hills alone in unfamiliar country? And your men are all in there, in Circe's palace, cooped like swine, hawked by Jal in the styes. Have you come to set them free? Well, I warn you, you won't get home yourself. You'll stay right there, trapped with all the rest. But wait, I can save you. free you from that great danger. Look, here is a potent drug. Take it to Circe's halls. Its power alone will shield you from the fatal day. Let me tell you of all the witch's subtle craft. She'll mix you a potion, lace the brew with drugs, but she'll be powerless to bewitch you. Even so, this magic herb I give will fight her spells. Now here's your plan of action step by step. The moment Circe strikes with her long thin wand, you draw your sharp sword sheathed at your hip and rush her fast as if to run her through. She'll cower in fear and coax you to her bed, but don't refuse the goddess's bed. Not then. Not if she's to release your friends and treat you well yourself. But have her swear the blinding oath of the blessed gods she'll never plot some new intrigue to harm you. Once you lie there naked, never unman you, strip away your courage. With that, the giant killer handed over the magic herb, pulling it from the earth. And Hermes showed me all its name and nature. Its root is black and its flower white as milk, and the gods call it moly. Dangerous for a mortal man to pluck from the soil, but not for the deathless gods. All lies within their power. Now Hermes went his way to the steep heights of Olympus over the island's woods, while I, just approaching the halls of Circe, my heart a heaving storm at every step, paused at her doors. The nymph with lovely braids, I stood and shouted to her there. She heard my voice. She opened her gleaming doors at once and stepped forth, inviting me in, and I went, all anguish now. She led me in to sit on a silver-studded chair, ornately carved with a stool to rest my feet. In a golden bowl she mixed the potion for me to drink, stirring her poison in, her heart a-swirl with evil. And then she passed it on. I drank it down, but it never worked its spell. She struck with her wand, and now, she cried, off to your sty, you swine, and wallow with your friends. But I drew my sharp sword, sheathed at my hip, and rushed her fast as if to run her through. She screamed, slid under my blade, hugged my knees with a flood of warm tears and a burst of winging words. Who are you? Where are you from? Your city? Your parents? I'm wonderstruck. You drank my drugs. You're not bewitched. Never has any other man withstood my potion, never. Once it's past his lips and he has drunk it down, you have a mind in you no magic can enchant. You must be Odysseus, man of twists and turns. Hermes, the giant killer, god of the golden wand. He always said you come. Homeward bound from Troy in your swift black ship. Come, sheath your sword. Let's go to bed together. Mount my bed and mix in the magic work of love. We'll breed deep trust between us. So she enticed, but I fought back, still wary. Circe, Circe, how dare you tell me to treat you with any warmth? You who turned my men to swine in your own house, and now you hold me here as well. Teeming with treachery, you lured me to your room to mount your bed. So once I lie there naked, you'll unman me, strip away my courage. Mount your bed? Not for all the world. Not until you consent to swear, goddess, a binding oath. You'll never plot some new intrigue to harm me. Straight away she began to swear the oath that I required. She'd never do me harm. And when she'd finished, then, at last, I mounted Circe's gorgeous bed. At the same time, her handmaids bustled through the halls, four in all, who performed the goddess's household tasks. Nymphs, daughters born of the springs and groves and the sacred rivers running down to open sea. One draped the chairs with fine crimson covers. Over the seats she'd spread with linen cloths below. A second drew up silver tables before the chairs and laid out golden trays to hold the bread. A third mulled heady, heart-warming wine in a silver bowl and set out golden cups. A fourth brought water and lit a blazing fire beneath a massive cauldron. The water heated soon, and once it reached the boil in the glowing bronze, she eased me into a tub and bathed me from the cauldron, mixing the hot and cold to suit my taste. Showering head and shoulders down until she'd washed away the spirit-numbing exhaustion from my body. The bathing finished, rubbing me sleek with oil, throwing warm fleece and a shirt around my shoulders, she led me in to sit on a silver-studded chair, ornately carved with a stool to rest my feet. A maid brought water soon in a graceful golden pitcher, and over a silver basin tipped it out so I might rinse my hands, then pulled a gleaming table to my side. A staid housekeeper brought on bread to serve me, appetizers aplenty too, lavish with her bounty. She pressed me to eat. I had no taste for food. I just sat there, mind wandering far away, lost in grim forebodings. As soon as Circe saw me, huddled, not touching my food, immersed in sorrow, she sidled near with a coaxing winged word. Odysseus, why just sit there, struck dumb, eating your heart out, not touching food or drink? Suspect me of still more treachery? Nothing to fear. Haven't I just sworn my solemn binding oath? So she asked, but I protested. Circe, how could any man in his right mind endure the taste of food and drink before he'd freed his comrades in arms and looked them in the eyes? If you really want me to eat and drink, set them free, all my beloved comrades. Let me feast my eyes. So I demanded. Circe strode on through the halls and out, her wand held high in hand, and, flinging open the pens, drove forth my men, who looked like full-grown swine. Facing her, there they stood as she went along the ranks, anointing them one by one with some new magic oil. And look, the bristles grown by the first wicked drug that Circe gave them slipped away from their limbs, and they turned men again, younger than ever, taller by far, more handsome to the eye, and yes, they knew me at once, and each man grasped my hands, and a painful longing for tears overcame us all. A terrible sobbing echoed through the house. The goddess herself was moved, and standing by me, warmly urged me on, a lustrous goddess now. Royal son of Laertes, Odysseus, tried and true, go at once to your ship at the water's edge. Haul her straight up on the shore first and stow your cargo and running gear in caves. Then back you come and bring your trusty crew. Her urging won my stubborn spirit over. Down I went to the swift ship at the water's edge, and there on the decks I found my loyal crew, consumed with grief and weeping live warm tears. But now as calves in stalls when cows come home, droves of them herded back from field to farmyard once they've grazed their fill, as all their young calves come frisking out to meet them, bucking out of their pens, lowing non-stop, jostling, rushing round their mothers. So my shipmates there at the sight of my return came pressing round me now, streaming tears, so deeply moved in their hearts they felt as if they'd made it back to their own land, their city, Ithaca's rocky soil where they were bred and reared. And through their tears their words went winging home. You're back again, my king. How thrilled we are, as if we'd reached our country, Ithaca at last. But come, tell us about the fate our comrades met. Still I replied with a timely word of comfort. Let's haul our ship straight up on the shore first and stow our cargo and running gear in caves. Then hurry, all of you, come along with me to see our friends in the magic halls of Circe. Eating and drinking, the feast flows on forever. So I said, and they jumped to do my bidding. Only Eurylochus tried to hold my shipmates back, his mutinous outbursts aimed at one and all. Poor fools, where are we running now? Why are we tempting fate? Why stumble blindly down to Circe's halls? She'll turn us all into pigs or wolves or lions, made to guard that palace of hers by force, I tell you. Just as the Cyclops trapped our comrades in his lair, with hot-headed Odysseus right beside them all. Thanks to this man's rashness, they died too. So he declared, and I had half a mind to draw the sharp sword from beside my hip and slice his head off, tumbling down in the dust. Close kin that he was. But comrades checked me, each man trying to calm me left and right. Captain, we'll leave him there if you command, just where he is, to sit and guard the ship. Lead us on to the magic halls of Circe. With that, up from the ship and shore they headed inland, nor did Eurylochus malinger by the hull. He straggled behind the rest, dreading the sharp blast of my rebuke. All the while Circe had bathed my other comrades in her palace, caring and kindly, rubbed them sleek with oil, and decked them out in fleecy cloaks and shirts. We found them all together feasting in her halls. Once we had recognized each other, gazing face to face, we all broke down and wept, and the house resounded now, and Circe, the lustrous one, came toward me, pleading. Royal son of Laertes, Odysseus, man of action, no more tears now. Calm these tides of sorrow. Well, I know what pains you bore on this swarming sea, what punishment you endured from hostile men on land. But come now, eat your food and drink your wine, till the same courage fills your chests now as then, when you first set sail from native land, from rocky Ithaca. Now you're burnt out husks, your spirits haggard, sere, always brooding over your wanderings long and hard, your heart's never lifting with any joy. You've suffered far too much. So she enticed him when our battle-hardened spirit's over, and there we sat at ease, day in, day out, till a year had run its course, feasting on sides of meat and draughts of heady wine. But then when the year was gone and the seasons wheeled by and the months waned and the long days came round again, my loyal comrades took me aside and prodded. Captain, this is madness. High time you thought of your own home at last, if it really is your fate to make it back alive and reach your well-built house and native land. Their urging brought my stubborn spirit around. So all that day till the sun went down we sat and feasted on sides of meat and heady wine. Then when the sun had set and night came on, the men lay down to sleep in the shadowed halls. But I went up to that luxurious bed of Circe's, hugged her by the knees, and the goddess heard my winging supplication. Circe, now make good a promise you gave me once. It's time to help me home. My heart longs to be home, my comrades' hearts as well. They wear me down, pleading with me whenever you're away. So I pressed, and the lustrous goddess answered me in turn. Royal son of Laertes, Odysseus, old campaigner, stay on no more in my house against your will. But first another journey calls. You must travel down to the house of death, and the awesome one Persephone, there to consult the ghost of Tiresias, seer of Thebes, the great blind prophet whose mind remains unshaken. Even in death, Persephone has given him wisdom, everlasting vision to him and him alone. The rest of the dead are empty, flitting shades. So she said and crushed the heart inside me. I knelt in her bed and wept. I'd no desire to go on living and see the rising light of day. But once I had my fill of tears and writhing there, at last I found the words to venture. Circe, Circe, who can pilot us on that journey? Who has ever reached the house of death in a black ship? The lustrous goddess answered, never pausing. Royal son of Laertes, Odysseus, born for exploits, let no lack of a pilot at the helm concern you know. Just step your mast and spread your white sail wide. Sit back and the north wind will speed you on your way. Once your vessel has cut across the ocean river, you will raise a desolate coast, and Persephone's grove, her tall black poplars, willows whose fruit dies young. Beat your vessel hard by the ocean's churning shore, and make your own way down to the moldering house of death. And there into Acheron, the flood of grief, two rivers flow, the torrent river of fire, the wailing river of tears that branches off from Styx, the stream of hate, and a stark crag looms, where the two rivers thunder down and meet. Once there, go forward, hero. Do as I say now. Dig a trench of about a forearm's depth and length, and around it pour libations out to all the dead, first with milk and honey, and then with mellow wine. Then water third and last, and sprinkle glistening barley over it all. And vow again and again to all the dead, to the drifting listless spirits of their ghosts, that once you return to Ithaca, you will slaughter a bear and heifer in your halls, the best you have, and load a pyre with treasures, and to Tiresias alone, apart, you will offer a sleek black ram, the pride of all your herds. And once your prayers have invoked the nations of the dead in their dim glory, slaughter a ram and a black ewe, turning both their heads toward Erebus, but turn your head away, looking toward the ocean river. Suddenly then the countless shades of the dead and gone will surge around you there. But order your men at once to flay the sheep that lie before you, killed by your ruthless blade, and burn them both, and then say prayers to the gods, to the almighty god of death and dread Persephone. But you, draw your sharp sword from beside your hip, sit down on alert there, and never let the ghosts of the shambling, shiftless dead come near that blood, till you have questioned Tiresias yourself. Soon the great seer will appear before you, captain of armies. He will tell you the way to go, the stages of your voyage, how you can cross the swarming sea and reach home at last. And with those words, Dawn rose on her golden throne, and Circe dressed me quickly in sea cloak and shirt, while the queen slipped on a loose, glistening robe, filmy, a joy to the eye. Round her waist she ran a brocaded golden belt, and over her head a scarf to shield her brow. And I strode on through the halls to stir my men, hovering over each with a winning word. Up now, no more lazing away in sleep. We must set sail. Queen Circe has shown the way. I brought them round, my hardy friends in arms, but not even from there could I get them safely off without a loss. There was a man, Elpenor, the youngest in our ranks. None too brave in battle, none too sound in mind. He'd strayed from his mates in Circe's magic halls, and keen for the cool night air, sodden with wine, he'd bedded down on her roofs. He roused by the shouts and tread of marching men, he leapt up with a start at dawn, but still so dazed he forgot to climb back down again by the long ladder. Headfirst from the roof he plunged, his neck snapped from the backbone, his soul flew down to death. Once on our way, I gave the men their orders. You think we are headed home, our own dear land? Well, Circe sets us on a rather different course. Down to the house of death and the awesome one, Persephone, there to consult the ghost of Tiresias, seer of Thebes. So I said, and it broke my shipmates' hearts. They sank down on the ground, moaning, tore their hair, but it gained us nothing. What good can come of grief? Back to the swift ship at the water's edge we went, our spirits deep in anguish, faces wet with tears. But Circe got to the dark hull before us, tethered a ram and black ewe close by, slipping past unseen. Who can glimpse a god who wants to be invisible gliding here and there? Book 11, The Kingdom of the Dead. Now down we came to the ship at the water's edge. We hauled and launched her into the sunlit breakers first, stepped the mast in the black craft and set our sail and loaded the sheep aboard, the ram and ewe. Then we ourselves embarked, streaming tears, our hearts weighed down with anguish. But Circe, the awesome nymph with lovely braids, who speaks with human voice, sent us our hardy shipmate, yes, a fresh following wind ruffling up in our wake, bellying out our sail to drive our blue prow on as we, securing the running gear from stern to stern, sat aback while the wind and helmsman kept her true on course. The sail stretched taut as she cut the sea all day, and the sun sank, and the roads of the world grew dark. And she made the outer limits, the ocean river's bounds, where Cimmerian people have their homes, their realm and city shrouded in mist and cloud. The eye of the sun can never flash his rays through the dark and bring them light. Not when he climbs the starry skies, or when he wheels back down from the heights to touch the earth once more. An endless, deadly night overhangs those wretched men. There, gaining that point, we beached our craft and herding out the sheep, we picked our way by the ocean's banks until we gained the place that Circe made our goal. Here at the spot, Perimedes and Eurylochus held the victims fast, and I, drawing my sharp sword beside my hip, dug a trench of about a forearm's length and depth and length, and around it poured libations out to all the dead, first with milk and honey, and then with mellow wine, and then water third and last, and sprinkled glistening barley over it all. And time and again I vowed to all the dead, to the drifting listless spirits of their ghosts, that once I returned to Ithaca I would slaughter a barren heifer in my halls, the best I had, and load a pyre with treasures, and to Tiresias alone apart I would offer a sleek black ram, and the pride of all my herds. And once my vows and prayers had invoked the nations of the dead, I took the victims over the trench, I cut their throats, and the dark blood flowed in. And up out of Erebus they came, flocking toward me now, the ghosts of the dead and gone. Brides and unwed youths, and old men who had suffered much, and girls with their tender hearts freshly scarred by sorrow, and great armies of battle dead, stabbed by bronze spears, men of war still wrapped in bloody armor, thousands swarming round the trench from every side. Unearthly cries, blanching terror gripped me. I ordered the men at once to flay the sheep that lay before us, killed by my ruthless blade, and burn them both, and then say prayers to the gods, to the almighty god of death and dread Persephone. But I, the sharp sword drawn from beside my hip, sat down on alert there and never let the ghosts of the shambling, shiftless dead come near that blood till I had questioned Tiresias myself. But first the ghost of Elpenor, my companion, came toward me. He had not been buried under the wide ways of earth, not yet. We left his body in Circe's house, unwept, unburied. This other labor pressed us, but I wept to see him now. Pity touched my heart, and I called out a winged word to him there. Elpenor, how did you travel down to the world of darkness? Faster on foot, I see, than in my black ship. My comrade groaned as he offered an answer. Royal son of Laertes, Odysseus, old campaigner, the doom of an angry god and God knows how much wine, they were my ruin, Captain. I bedded down on the roof of Circe's house, but never thought to climb back down again by the long ladder. Head first from the roof I plunged, my neck snapped from the backbone, my soul flew down to death. Now, I beg you by those you left behind so far from here, your wife, your father who bred and reared you as a boy, and Telemachus, left at home in your halls, your only son. Well, I know when you leave this lodging of the dead that you and your ship will put ashore again at the island of Aea. Then and there, my lord, remember me, I beg you. Don't sail off and desert me, left behind unwept, unburied, don't, or my curse may draw God's fury on your head. No, burn me in full armor, all my harness, heap my mound by the churning gray surf, a man whose luck ran out. So even men to come will learn my story. Perform my rites and plant on my tomb that oar I swung with mates when I rode among the living. All this, my unlucky friend, I reassured him, I will do for you. I won't forget a thing. So we sat and faced each other, trading our bleak parting words, I on my side holding my sword above the blood, he across from me there, my comrade's phantom dragging out his story. But look, the ghost of my mother came. My mother, dead and gone now, Anticlea, daughter of that great heart, Autolycus, whom I had left alive when I sailed for sacred Troy. I broke into tears to see her there, but filled with pity, even throbbing with grief. I would not let her ghost approach the blood till I had questioned Tiresias myself. At last he came, the shade of the famous Theban prophet, holding a golden scepter, knew me at once and hailed me. Royal son of Laertes, Odysseus, master of exploits, man of pain. What now? What brings you here, forsaking the light of day, to see this joyless kingdom of the dead? Stand back from the trench, put up your sharp sword so I can drink the blood and tell you all the truth. Moving back, I thrust my silver-studded sword deep in its sheath, and once he had drunk the dark blood, the words came ringing from the prophet in his power. A sweet, smooth journey home, renowned Odysseus. This is what you seek, but a god will make it hard for you. I know. You will never escape the one who shakes the earth, quaking with anger at you still in rage because you blinded the Cyclops, his dear son. Even so, you and your crew may still reach home, suffering all the way, if you only have the power to curb their wild desire and curb your own. What's more, from the day your good trim vessel first puts in Ethrenacia Island, flees the cruel blue sea. There you will find them grazing, herds and fat flocks, the cattle of Aeolus, god of the sun who sees all, hears all things. Leave the beasts unharmed, your mind set on home, and you all may still reach Ithaca, bent with hardship. True, but harm them in any way, and I can see it now, your ship destroyed, your men destroyed as well. Even if you escape, you'll come home late and come a broken man, all shipmates lost, alone in a stranger's ship. And you will find a world of pain at home. Crude, arrogant men devouring all your goods, courting your noble wife, offering gifts to win her. No doubt you'll pay them back in blood when you come home. Once you have killed those suitors in your halls, by the sheath or an open fight with slashing bronze, go forth once more, you must. Carry your well-planned oar until you come to a race of people who know nothing of the sea, whose food is never seasoned with salt. Strangers all, to ships with their crimson prows and long slim oars, wings that make ships fly. And here is your sign. Unmistakable, clear, so clear you cannot miss it. When another traveler falls in with you and calls that weight across your shoulder, a fan to winnow grain, then plant your bladed, balanced oar in the earth, and sacrifice fine beasts to the Lord God of the sea, Poseidon, a ram, a bull, and a rampaging wild boar. Then journey home and render noble offerings up to the deathless gods who rule the vaulting skies, to all the gods in order. And at last your own death will steal upon you, a gentle, painless death. Far from the sea it comes to take you down, borne down with the years in ripe old age, with all your people there in blessed peace around you. All that I've told you will come true. O Tiresias, I replied as the prophet finished, surely the gods have spun this out as fate, the gods themselves. But tell me one more thing and tell me clearly. I see the ghost of my long-lost mother here before me. Dead, crouching close to the blood in silence, she cannot bear to look me in the eyes, her own son, or speak a word to me. How, Lord, can I make her know me for the man I am? One rule there is, the famous seer explained, and simple for me to say and you to learn. Any one of the ghosts you let approach the blood will speak the truth to you. Any one you refuse will turn and fade away. And with those words, now that his prophecies had closed, the awesome shade of Lord Tiresias strode back to the house of death. But I kept watch there, steadfast till my mother approached and drank the dark, clouding blood. She knew me at once and wailed out in grief, and her words came winging toward me, flying home. Oh, my son, what brings you down to the world of death and darkness? You are still alive. It's hard for the living to catch a glimpse of this. Great rivers flow between us, terrible waters. The ocean first of all. No one could ever ford that stream on foot, only aboard some sturdy craft. Have you just come from Troy, wandering long years with your men and ship, not yet returned to Ithaca? You've still not seen your wife inside your halls? Mother, I replied, I had to venture down to the house of death to consult the shade of Tiresias, seer of Thebes. Never yet have I neared Achaea, never once set foot on native ground, always wandering endless hardships from that day I first set sail with King Agamemnon bound for Troy, the stallion land, to fight the Trojans there. But tell me about yourself and spare me nothing. What form of death overcame you? What laid you low? Some long, slow illness? Or did Artemis, showering arrows, come with her painless shafts and bring you down? Tell me of father, tell of the son I left behind. Do my royal rights still lie in their safekeeping? Or does some stranger hold the throne by now because men think that I'll come home no more? Please tell me about my wife, her turn of mind, her thoughts, still standing fast beside our son, still guarding our great estates, secure as ever now? Or has she wed some other countryman at last, the finest prince among them? Surely, surely, my noble mother answered quickly. She's still waiting there in your halls, poor woman, suffering so, her life an endless hardship like your own, wasting away the nights, weeping away the days. No one has taken over your royal rights, not yet. Telemachus still holds your great estates in peace. He attends the public banquets shared with all. The feasts a man of justice should enjoy, for every lord invites him. As for your father, he keeps to his own farm, he never goes to town. With no bed for him there, no blankets, glass he throws. All winter long he sleeps in the lodge with servants, in the ashes by the fire, his body wrapped in rags. But when summer comes, and the bumper crops of harvest, any spot on the rising ground of his vineyard rows, he makes his bed, heaped high with fallen leaves, and there he lies in anguish, with his old age bearing hard upon him too. And his grief grows as he longs for your return. And I, with the same grief, died and met my fate. No sharp-eyed huntress, showering arrows through the halls, approached and brought me down with painless shafts. Nor did some hateful illness strike me that so often devastates the body, drains our limbs of power. No, it was my longing for you, my shining Odysseus, you and your quickness, you and your gentle ways, that tore away my life that had been sweet. And I, my mind in turmoil, how I longed to embrace my mother's spirit, dead as she was. 3 times I rushed toward her, desperate to hold her. 3 times she fluttered through my fingers, sifting away like a shadow, dissolving like a dream, and each time the grief cut to the heart, sharper, yes. And I cried out to her, words winging into the darkness. Mother, why not wait for me? How I long to hold you, so even here in the house of death we can fling our loving arms around each other, take some joy in the tears that numb the heart. Or is this just some wraith that great Persephone sends my way to make me ache with sorrow all the more? My noble mother answered me at once. My son, the unluckiest man alive. This is no deception sent by Queen Persephone. This is just the way of mortals and when we die. Sinews no longer bind the flesh and bones together. The fire in all its fury burns the body down to ashes once life slips from the white bones and the spirit, rustling, flitters away, flown like a dream. But you must long for the daylight. Go quickly. Remember all these things so one day you can tell them to your wife. And so we both confided, trading parting words. And there slowly came a grand array of women, all sent before me now by august Persephone, and all were wives and daughters once of princes. They swarmed in a flock around the dark blood, while I searched for a way to question each alone. And the more I thought, the more this seemed the best. Drawing forth a long, sharp sword from beside my hip, I would not let them drink the dark blood, all in a rush. And so they waited, coming forward one after another. Each declared her lineage, and I explored them all. And the first I saw there, Tyro, born of kings, who said her father was the great Lord Salmoneus, said that she was the wife of Cretheus, Aeolus' son. And when she fell in love with the river god Enipeus, far the clearest river flowing across the earth, and so she'd haunt Enipeus' glinting streams, till taking his shape one day, the god who girds the earth and makes it tremble, bedded her where the swirling river rushes out to sea. And a surging wave reared up, high as a mountain dark, arching over to hide the god and mortal girl together. Loosing her virgin belt, he lapped her round in sleep, and when the god had consummated his work of love, he took her by the hand and hailed her warmly. Rejoice in our love, my lady. And when this year has run its course, you will give birth to glorious children. Bedding down with the gods is never barren, futile, and you must tend them, breed and rear them well. Now home you go, and restrain yourself, I say. Never breathe your lover's name, but know, I am Poseidon, god who rocks the earth. With that he drove back in the heaving waves, and she conceived for the god and bore him Peleus, Neleus, and both grew up to be stalwart aides of Zeus Almighty, both men alike. Peleus lived on the plains of Iolcos, rich in sheep flocks. Neleus lived in sandy Pylos, and the noble queen bore sons to Cretheus too. Aeson, Phares, and Amython, exultant charioteer. And after Tyro I saw Aesopus' daughter, Antiope. Proud she'd spent a night in the arms of Zeus himself, and borne the god twin sons, Amphion and Zethus, the first to build the footings of seven-gated Thebes, her bastions too, for lacking ramparts none could live in a place so vast, so up and strong as both men were. And I saw Alcmena next, Amphitrion's wife, who slept in the clasp of Zeus and merged in love, and brought forth Heracles, rugged will and lion heart. And I saw Megara too, magnanimous Creon's daughter, wed to the stalwart Heracles, the hero never daunted. And I saw the mother of Oedipus, beautiful Epicaste. What a monstrous thing she did in all her innocence. She married her own son, who killed his father. Then he married her. But the god soon made it known to all mankind. So he in growing pain ruled on in beloved Thebes, lording Cadmus' people, thanks to the gods' brutal plan, while she went down to death who guards the massive gates. Lashing a noose to a steep rafter, there she hangs aloft, strangling in all her anguish, leaving her son to bear the world of horror a mother's furies bring to life. And I saw magnificent Chloris, the one whom Neleus wooed, and won with a hoard of splendid gifts, so dazzled by her beauty years ago. The youngest daughter of Iasus' son Amphion, the great Minyan king who ruled Orchomenus once. She was his queen in Pylos. She bore him shining sons, Nestor and Chromius. Periclymenus too, good prince. And after her son she bore a daughter, majestic Pero, the marvel of her time, courted by all the young lords round about. But Neleus would not give her to any suitor, none but the man who might drive home the herds, that powerful Iphiclus had stolen. Lurching, broad in the brow, those long-horned beasts, and no small task to round them up from Phylace, only the valiant seer Melampus volunteered. He would drive them home. But a god's iron sentence bound him fast. Barbarous herdsmen dragged him off in chains. Yet when the months and days had run their course, and the year wheeled round and the seasons came again, then mighty Iphiclus loosed the prophet's shackles, once he had told him all the gods' decrees. And so the will of Zeus was done at last. And I saw Leda next, Tyndareus' wife, who'd borne the king 2 sons, intrepid twins, Castor, breaker of horses, and the hardy boxer Polydeuces, both buried now in the life-giving earth, though still alive. Even under the earth, Zeus grants them that distinction. One day alive, the next day dead, each twin by turns. They both hold honors equal to the gods'. And I saw Iphimedia next, Aeolus' wife, who claimed she lay in the sea lord's loving waves and gave the god 2 sons. But they did not live long. Otis, staunch as god and far-famed Ephialtes. They were the tallest men the fertile each has borne, the handsomest too, by far, aside from renowned Orion. 9 yards across they measured, even at 9 years old. 9 fathoms tall they towered. They even threatened the deathless gods they'd storm Olympus's heights with a pounding rush and grinding shock of battle. They were wild to pile Ossa upon Olympus. Then on Ossa, Pelion dense with timber, their toeholds up the heavens. And they'd have won the day if they had reached peak strength, but Apollo, the son of Zeus, whom sleek-haired Leto bore, laid both giants low before their beards had sprouted, covering cheek and chin with a fresh crop of down. Phaedra and Procris, too, I saw, the lovely Ariadne, daughter of Minos, the harsh king. One day Theseus tried to spirit her off from Crete to Athens' sacred heights, but he got no joy from her. Artemis killed her first on wave-dashed Dia's shores, accused by Dionysus. And I saw Clymene, mare and loathsome Eriphiale, bride with a golden necklace, to lure her lawful husband to his death. But the whole cortege I could never tally, never name, not all the daughters and wives of great men I saw there. Long before that, the god-sent night would ebb away. But the time has come for sleep, either with friends aboard your swift ship or here in your own house. My passage home will rest with the gods and you. Odysseus paused. They all fell silent, hushed, his story holding them spellbound down the shadowed halls, till the white-armed queen Arete suddenly burst out. Phaeacians, how does this man impress you now? His looks, his build, the balanced mind inside him? The stranger is my guest, but let each of you princes shares the honor here. So let's not be too hasty to send him on his way, and don't scrimp on his gifts. His need is great, great as the riches pile up in your houses, thanks to the gods' goodwill. Following her, the old revered Echenius added his support, the eldest lord on the island of Phaeacia. Friends, the words of our considerate queen, they never miss the mark or fail our expectations. So do as Arete says, though in Alcinous here depend all words in action. And so it will be. Alcinous stepped in grandly. Sure as I'm alive and rule our island men who love their oars. Our guest, much as he longs for passage home, must stay and wait it out here till tomorrow, till I can collect his whole array of parting gifts. His send-off rests with every noble here, but with me most of all, I hold the reins of power in the realm. Odysseus, deft and tactful, echoed back, Alcinous, majesty, shining among your island people. If you would urge me now to stay here 1 whole year, then speed me home weighed down with lordly gifts, I'd gladly have it so. Better by far that way, the fuller my arms on landing there at home, the more respected, well received I'd be by all who saw me sailing back to Ithaca. Ah, Odysseus, Alcinous replied, one look at you and we know that you are no one who would cheat us, no fraud. Such as the dark soil breeds and spreads across the face of the earth these days. Crowds of vagabonds frame their lies so tightly none can test them, but you, what grace you give your words and what good sense within. You have told your story with all a singer's skill, the miseries you endured, your great Achaeans too. But come now, tell me truly, your godlike comrades. Did you see any heroes down in the house of death? Any who sailed with you and met their doom at Troy? The night's still young. I'd say the night is endless. For us in the palace now, it's hardly time for sleep. Keep telling us your adventures, they are wonderful. I could hold out here till dawn's first light, if only you could bear, here in our halls, to tell the tale of the pains you suffered. So the man of countless exploits carried on, Alcinous Majesty, shining among your island people. There is a time for many words, a time for sleep as well. But if you insist on hearing more, I'd never stint on telling my own tale and those more painful still, the griefs of my comrades dead in the war's wake, who escaped the battle cries of Trojan armies, only to die in blood at journey's end, thanks to a vicious woman's will. Now then, no sooner had Queen Persephone driven off the ghosts of lovely women, scattering left and right, than forward marched the shade of Atreus' son, Agamemnon, fraught with grief and flanked by all his comrades, troops of his men-at-arms who died beside him, who met their fate in Lord Aegisthus' halls. He knew me at once, as soon as he drank the blood, and wailed out, shrilly, tears sprang to his eyes. He thrust his arms around me, keen to embrace me there. No use. The great force was gone, the strength lost forever. Now, that filled his rippling limbs in the old days. I wept at the sight. My heart went out to the man, my words too, in a winging flight of pity. Famous Atrides, lord of men, Agamemnon, what fatal stroke of destiny brought you down? Wrecked in the ships when Lord Poseidon roused some punishing blast of storm winds, gust on gust? Or did ranks of enemies mow you down on land as you tried to raid and cut off herds and flocks, or fought to win their city, take their women? The field marshal's ghost replied at once, royal son of Laertes, Odysseus, mastermind of war. I was not wrecked in the ships when Lord Poseidon roused some punishing blast of storm winds, gust on gust, nor did ranks of enemies mow me down on land. Aegisthus hatched my doom and my destruction. He killed me. He with my own accursed wife. He invited me to his palace, sat me down to feast, then cut me down as a man cuts down some ox at the trough. So I died, a wretched, ignominious death, and round me all my comrades killed, no mercy, one after another, just like white-tusked boars, butchered in some rich lord of power's halls for a wedding, banquet, or groaning public feast. You in your day have witnessed hundreds slaughtered, killed in single combat or killed in pitched battle, true, but if you'd laid eyes on this, it would have wrenched your heart. How we sprawled by the mixing bowl and loaded tables there, throughout the palace, the whole floor washed with blood. But the death cry of Cassandra, Priam's daughter, the most pitiful thing I heard. My treacherous queen, Clytemnestra, killed her over my body, yes, and I, lifting my fists, beat them down on the ground, dying, writhing around the sword. But she, that whore, she turned her back on me. Well on my way to death, she even lacked the heart to seal my eyes with her hand or close my jaws. So there's nothing more deadly, bestial than a woman set on works like these. What a monstrous thing she plotted, slaughtered her own lawful husband. Why, I expected at least some welcome home from all my children, all my household slaves when I came sailing back again, but she, the queen hell-bent on outrage, bathes in shame not only herself but the whole breed of womankind, even the honest ones to come forever down the years. So he declared, and I cry out, how terrible! Zeus from the very start, the Thunder King, has hated the race of Atreus with a vengeance. His trustiest weapon, women's twisted wiles. What armies of us died for the sake of Helen? Clytemnestra schemed your death while you were worlds away. True, Agamemnon's ghost kept pressing on. So even your own wife, never indulge her too far. Never reveal the whole truth, whatever you may know. Just tell her a part of it. Be sure to hide the rest. Not that you, Odysseus, will be murdered by your wife. She's much too steady. Her feelings run too deep. Icarius' daughter Penelope, that wise woman. She was a young bride, I well remember. We left her behind when we went off to war. With an infant boy she nestled at her breast. That boy must sit and be counted with the men now. Happy man. His beloved father will come sailing home and see his son, and he will embrace his father. That is only right. But my wife, she never even let me feast eyes on my own son. She killed me first, his father. I tell you this, bear it in mind, you must. When you reach your homeland, steer your ship into port in secret, never out in the open. The time for trusting women's gone forever. Enough, come, tell me this, and be precise. Have you heard news of my son? Where is he living now? Perhaps in Orchomenos, perhaps in sandy Pylos, or off in the Spartan plains with Menelaus? He's not dead yet, my prince Orestes, no. He's somewhere on the earth. So he probed, I cut it short. Atreides, why ask me that? I know nothing, whether he's dead or alive. It's wrong to lead you on with idle words. So we stood there, trading heartsick stories, deep in grief, as the tears streamed down our faces. But now there came the ghosts of Peleus' son Achilles, Patroclus, fearless Antilochus, and great Ajax too. The first in stature, first in build and bearing of all the Argives after Peleus' matchless son. The ghost of the splendid runner knew me at once, and hailed me with a flight of mournful questions. Royal son of Laertes, Odysseus, man of tactics, reckless friend, what next? What greater feat can that cunning head contrive? What daring brought you down to the house of death, where the senseless burn-out race of mortals make their home? The voice of his spirit paused, and I was quick to answer. Achilles, son of Peleus, greatest of the Achaeans. I had to consult Tiresias, driven here by hopes he would help me journey home to rocky Ithaca. Never yet have I neared Achaea, never once set foot on native ground. My life is endless trouble. But you, Achilles, there's not a man in the world more blessed than you. There never has been, never will be one. Time was, when you were alive, we Argives honored you as a god, and now down here I see you lord it over the dead in all your power. So grieve no more at dying, great Achilles. I reassured the ghost, but he broke out protesting. No winning words about death to me, shining Odysseus. By God, I'd rather slave on earth for another man, some dirt-poor tenant farmer who scrapes to keep alive, than rule down here over all the breathless dead. But come, tell me the news about my gallant son. Did he make his way to the wars? Did the boy become a champion, yes or no? Tell me of the noble Peleus, any word you've heard. Still holding pride to place among his Myrmidon hordes? Or did they despise the man in Hellas and in Phthia because old age has lamed his arms and legs? For I no longer stand in the light of day, the man I was, comrade in arms to help my father as I once helped our armies, killing the best fighters Troy could field in the wide world up there. Oh, to arrive at father's house, the man I was, for one brief day, I'd make my fury and my hands. Invincible hands, a thing of terror to all those men who abuse the king with force and wrest away his honor. So he grieved, but I tried to lend him heart. About noble Peleus I can tell you nothing, but about your own dear son, Neoptolemus, I can report the whole story as you wish. I myself in my trim ship, I brought him out to Skyros to join the Argives under arms, and dug in around Troy, debating battle tactics. He always spoke up first and always on the mark. Godlike Nestor and I alone excelled the boy. Yes, and when our armies fought on the plain of Troy, he'd never hang back with the main force of men. He'd always charge ahead, giving ground to no one in his fury, and scores of men he killed in bloody combat. How could I list them all, naming them all now? The fighting ranks he leveled, battling for the Argives. But what a soldier he laid low with a bronze sword, the hero Eurypylus, Telephus' son, and round him groups of his own Setian comrades slaughtered, lured to war by the bribe his mother took. The only man I saw to put Eurypylus in the shade was Memnon, son of the morning. Again, when our champions climbed inside the horse that Epeius built with labor, and I held full command to spring our pack ambush open or keep it sealed. All our lords and captains were wiping off their tears, knees shaking beneath each man, but not your son. Never once did I see his glowing skin go pale. He never flickered a tear from his cheeks, no. He kept on begging me there to let him burst from the horse, kept gripping his hilted sword, his heavy bronze-tipped javelin, keen to loose his fighting fury against the Trojans. Then, once we'd sacked King Priam's craggy city, laden with his fair share and princely prize, he boarded his own ship, his body all unscarred. Not a wound from a flying spear or a sharp sword, cut and thrust close up, the common marks of war. Random raging Ares plays no favorites. So I said, and off he went, the ghost of the great runner, Aeolus' grandson, loping with long strides across the fields of Asphodel, triumphant in all I had told him of his son, his gallant, glorious son. Now the rest of the ghosts, the dead and gone, came swarming up around me, deep in sorrow there, each asking about the grief that touched him most. Only the ghost of great Ajax, son of Telamon, kept his distance, blazing with anger at me still for the victory I had won. By the ships that time I pressed my claim for the arms of Prince Achilles. His queenly mother had set them up as prizes. Pallas and captive Trojans served as judges. Would to God I'd never won such trophies. All for them the earth closed over Ajax, that proud hero Ajax. Greatest in build, greatest in works of war, of all the Argives after Peleus' matchless son. I cried out to him now. I tried to win him over. Ajax, son of noble Telamon, still determined, even in death, not once to forget that rage you trained on me for those accursed arms. The gods set up that prize to play the Achaeans. So great a tower of strength we lost when you went down. For your death we grieved as we did for Achilles' death. We grieved incessantly true, and none's to blame but Zeus, who aided Achaea's fighting spearmen so intensely. Zeus sealed your doom. Come closer, king, and listen to my story. Conquer your rage, your blazing, headstrong pride. So I cried out, but Ajax answered not a word. He stalked off downward toward Erebus, into the dark, to join the other lost, departed dead. Yet now, despite his anger, he might have spoken to me, or I to him. But the heart inside me stirred with some desire to see the ghosts of others dead and gone. And I saw Minos there, illustrious son of Zeus, firmly enthroned, holding his golden scepter, judging all the dead, some on their feet, some seated, all clustering round the king of justice, pleading for his verdicts, reached in the house of death with its all-embracing gates. I next caught sight of Orion, that huge hunter, rounding up on the fields of Asphodel, those wild beasts, the man in life cut down on the lonely mountain slopes, brandishing in his hands the bronze-studded club that time can never shatter. I saw Tydeus, too, son of the mighty goddess Earth, sprawling there on the ground, spreading over 9 acres. 2 vultures hunched on either side of him, digging into his liver, beaking deep in the blood sac, and he with his frantic hands could never beat them off, for he had once dragged out the famous consort of Zeus in all her glory, Leto, threading her way toward Pytho's ridge, over the lovely dancing rings of Panopeus. And I saw Tantalus, too, bearing endless torture. He stood erect in a pool, as the water lapped his chin. Parched, he tried to drink, but he could not reach the surface. No, time and again the old man stooped, craving a sip. Time and again the water vanished, swallowed down. Laying bare the cake-black earth at his feet, some spirit drank it dry. And over his head, leafy trees dangled their fruit from high aloft, pomegranates and pears, and apples glowing red, succulent figs, and olives swelling sleek and dark. But as soon as the old man would strain to clutch them fast, the gust would toss them up to the lowering dark clouds. And I saw Sisyphus too, bound to his own torture, grappling his monster boulder with both arms working, heaving, hands struggling, legs driving. He kept on thrusting the rock uphill toward the brink. But just as it teetered, set to topple over, time and again, the immense weight of the thing would wheel it back, and the ruthless boulder would bound and tumble down to the plain again. So once again he would heave, would struggle to thrust it up, sweat drenching his body, dust swirling above his head. Next I caught a glimpse of powerful Heracles, his ghost, The man himself delights in the grand feast of the deathless gods on high, wed to Hebe, famed for her lithe, luring ankles, the daughter of mighty Zeus and Hera, shod in gold. Around him cries of the dead rang out like cries of birds, scattering left and right in horror, as on he came like night, naked bow in his grip, an arrow grooved on the bowstring, glaring round him fiercely, forever poised to shoot. A terror, too, that sword belt sweeping across his chest, a baldric of solid gold emblazoned with awesome work, bears and ramping boars in lines with wild, fiery eyes, and wars, routs, and battles, massacres, butchered men. May the craftsman who forged that masterpiece, whose skills could conjure up a belt like that, never forge another. Heracles knew me at once, at first glance, and hailed me with a winging burst of pity. Royal son of Laertes, Odysseus, famed for exploits, luckless man, you too? Braving out a fate as harsh as the fate I bore, alive in the light of day? Son of Zeus that I was, my torments never ended, forced to slay for a man not half the man I was. He saddled me with the worst heartbreaking labors. Why, he sent me down here once to retrieve the hound that guards the dead. No harder task for me, he thought, but I dragged the great beast up from the underworld to earth, and Hermes and gleaming-eyed Athena blazed the way. With that he turned, and back he went to the house of death, but I held fast in place, hoping that others might still come. Shades of famous heroes, men who died in the old days, and ghosts of an even older age I longed to see. Theseus and Pirithous, the gods' own radiant sons. But before I could, the death came surging round me, hordes of them, thousands raising unearthly cries, and blanching terror gripped me. Panic now that Queen Persephone might send up from death some monstrous head, some Gorgon's staring face. I rushed back to my ship, commanded all hands to take the decks, and cast off cables quickly. They swung aboard at once. They sat to the oars in ranks, and the strong tide of the ocean river swept her on downstream, sped by our rowing first, then by a fresh, fair wind. Book 12. The Cattle of the Sun. Now when her ship had left the ocean river rolling in her wake and launched out into open sea with its long swells to reach the island of Aea, east where the dawn, forever young, has home and dancing rings, and the sun his risings, heading in, we beached our craft on the sands. The crew swung out on the low sloping shore, and there we fell asleep, awaiting dawn's first light. As soon as dawn with her rose-red fingers shone again, I dispatched some men to Circe's halls to bring the dead Elpenor's body. We cut logs in haste, and out on the island's sharpest jutting headland held his funeral rites in sorrow, streaming tears. Once we'd burned the dead man in the dead man's armor, heaping his grave mound, hauling a stone that coped it well. We planted his balanced oar aloft to crown his tomb. And so we saw to his rites, each step in turn. Nor did our coming back from death escape Circe. She hurried toward us, decked in rich regalia, handmaids following close with trays of bread and meats galore and glinting ruddy wine. An illustrious goddess standing in our midst hailed us warmly. Ah, my daring, reckless friends, you who ventured down to the house of death alive, doomed to die twice over, others die just once. Come, take some food and drink some wine, rest here the livelong day, and then, tomorrow at daybreak, you must sail. But I will set you a course and chart each sea mark, so neither on sea nor land will some new trap ensnare you in trouble, make you suffer more. Her foresight won our fighting spirits over. So all that day till the sun went down we sat and feasted on sides of meat and heady wine. And then when the sun had set and night came on, the men lay down to sleep by the ship's stern cables. But Circe, taking me by the hand, drew me away from all my shipmates there and sat me down and lying beside me probed me for details. I told her the whole story start to finish. Then the queenly goddess laid my course. Your descent of the dead is over, true, but listen closely to what I tell you now, and God himself will bring it back to mind. First you will raise the island of the sirens, those creatures who spellbind any man alive, whoever comes their way. Whoever draws too close, off air, and catches the sirens' voices in the air, no sailing home for him, no wife rising to meet him, no happy children beaming up at their father's face. The high, thrilling song of the sirens will transfix him, lolling there in their meadow. Round them heaps of corses rotting away, rags of skin shriveling on their bones. Race straight past that coast. Soften some beeswax and stop your shipmates' ears so none can hear. None of the crew, but if you are bent on hearing, have them tie you hand and foot in the swift ship, erect at the mast block, lashed by rope so you can hear the siren's song to your heart's content. But if you plead, commanding your men to set you free, then they must lash you faster, rope on rope. But once your crew is rowed you past the sirens, a choice of routes is yours. I cannot advise you which to take or lead you through it at all. You must decide for yourself. But I can tell you the ways of either course. On one side, beetling cliffs shoot up, and against them pound the huge roaring breakers of blue-eyed Amphitrite. The clashing rocks, they're called by all the blissful gods. Not even birds can escape them, no, not even the doves that veer and fly ambrosia home to Father Zeus. Even of those, the sheer rocks always pick off one, and Father wings one more to keep the number up. No ship of men has ever approached and slipped past, always some disaster. Big timbers and sailors' corpses whirled away by the waves and lethal blasts of fire. One ship alone, one deep-sea craft sailed clear, the Argo, sung by the world when heading home from Aeolus' shores. And she would have crashed against those giant rocks and sunk at once if Hera, for love of Jason, had not sped her through. On the other side loomed two enormous crags, one thrust into the vaulting sky, its jagged peak, hooded round with a dark cloud that never leaves. No clear, bright air can ever bathe its crown, not even in the summer's heat or harvest time. No man on earth could scale it, mount its crest. Not even with 20 hands and 20 feet for climbing, the rock's so smooth, like dressed in burnished stone. And halfway up that cliffside stands a fog-bound cavern, gaping west toward Erebus, realm of death and darkness. Past it, great Odysseus, you should steer your ship. No rugged young archer could hit that yawning cave with a winged arrow shot from off the decks. Scylla lurks inside it, the yelping horror, yelping no louder than any suckling pup, but she's a grisly monster, I assure you. No one could look on her with any joy, not even a god who meets her face to face. She has 12 legs, all writhing, dangling down, and 6 long swaying necks, a hideous head on each head barred with a triple row of fangs, thick-set, packed tight, and armed to the hilt with black death. Holed up in the cavern's bowels from her waist down, she shoots out her heads out of that terrifying pit, angling right from her nest, wildly sweeping the reefs for dolphins, dogfish, or any bigger quarry she can drag from the thousands Amphitrite spawns in the groaning seas. No mariners yet can boast they've raced their ship past Scylla's lair without some mortal blow. With each of her 6 heads, she snatches up a man from the dark, proud craft and whisks him off. The other crag is lower, you will see, Odysseus, though both lie side by side, an arrow shot apart. Atop it a great fig tree rises, shaggy with leaves. Beneath it some Charybdis gulps the dark water down. 3 times a day she vomits it up, 3 times she gulps it down, that terror. Don't be there when the whirlpool swallows down. Not even the earthquake god could save you from disaster. No, hug Scylla's crag, sail on past her top speed. Better by far to lose 6 men and keep your ship than lose your entire crew. Yes, but tell me the truth now, goddess, I protested. Deadly Charybdis, can I possibly cut and run from her and still fight Scylla off when Scylla strikes my men? So stubborn, the lovely goddess countered. Hell-bent yet again on battle and feats of arms? Can't you bow to the deathless gods themselves? Scylla's no mortal. She's an immortal devastation. Terrible, savage, wild, no fighting her, no defense. Just flee the creature, that's the only way. Waste any time arming for battle beside a rock. I fear she'll lunge out again with all of her 6 heads and seize as many men. No, row for your lives. Invoke brute force, I tell you. Scylla's mother, she spawned her to scourge mankind. She can stop the monster's next attack. Then you will make the island of Thrinacia, where herds of the sun god's cattle graze, and fat sheep, and 7 herds of oxen, as many sheep flocks rich and woolly, 50 head in each. No breeding swells their number, nor do they ever die. And God has hurried them on, nymphs with glinting hair, Paethusa, Lampede, born of the sun god Aeolus by radiant Neaera. Their queenly mother bred and reared them both, then settled them on the island of Thrinacia, their homeland seas away, to guard their father's sheep and longhorn cattle. Leave the beasts unharmed, your mind set on home, and you may all still reach Ithaca, bent with hardship, true, but harm them in any way, and I can see it now. Your ship will be destroyed, your men destroyed as well, and even if you escape, you'll come home late, all shipmates lost, and come a broken man. At those words, Dawn rose on her golden throne, and lustrous Circe made her way back up the island. I went straight to my ship, commanding all hands to take the decks and cast off cables quickly. They swung aboard at once. They sat on the oars in ranks, and in rhythm churned the water white with stroke on stroke. And Circe, the nymph with glossy braids, the awesome one who speaks with human voice, sent us a hardy shipmate. Yes, a fresh following wind ruffling up in our wake, bellying out our sail to drive our blue prow on it as we, securing the running gear from stem to stern, sat back, while the wind and helmsman kept her true on course. At last, and sore at heart, I told my shipmates, friends, it's wrong for only 1 or 2 to know the revelations that lovely Circe made to me alone. I'll tell you all, so we can die with our eyes wide open now, or escape our fate and certain death together. First, she warns we must steer clear of the sirens, their enchanting song, their meadows starred with flowers. I alone was to hear their voices, so she said, but you must bind me with tight, chafing ropes, so I cannot move a muscle. Bound to the spot, erect at the mast block, lashed by ropes to the mast. And if I plead, commanding you to set me free, then lash me faster, rope on pressing rope. So I informed my shipmates point by point, all the while our trim ship was speeding toward the Sirens' island, driven on by the brisk wind. But then the wind fell in an instant, all glazed to a dead calm. A mysterious power hushed the heaving swells. The oarsmen leapt to their feet, struck the sail, stowed it deep in the hold, and sat to the oar blocks, thrashing the oarlocks, with polished oars, frothing the water white. Now with a sharp sword I sliced an ample wheel of beeswax down into pieces, kneaded them in my 2 strong hands, and the wax soon grew soft, worked by my strength and Helios's burning rays of the sun at high noon, and I stopped the ears of my comrades one by one. They bound me hand and foot in the tight ship, erect at the mast block, lashed by ropes to the mast, and rowed and churned the white cap stroke on stroke. We were just offshore as far as a man's shout can carry, scudding close, when the sirens sensed at once a ship was racing past and burst into their high, thrilling song. Come closer, famous Odysseus, Achaea's pride and glory. Moor your ship on our coast so you can hear our song. Never has any sailor passed our shores in his black craft until he has heard the honeyed voices pouring from our lips. And once he hears, to his heart's content sails on a wiser man. We know all the pains that the Greeks and Trojans once endured on the spreading plain of Troy when the gods willed it so. All that comes to pass on the fertile earth, we know it all. So they sent their ravishing voices out across the air, and the heart inside me throbbed to listen longer. I signaled the crew with frowns to set me free. They flung themselves at the oars and rowed on harder. Perimedes and Eurylochus springing up at once to bind me faster with rope on chafing rope. But once we'd left the silence fading in our wake, once we could hear their song no more, their urgent call, my steadfast crew was quick to remove the wax I'd used to seal their ears and loose the bonds that lashed me. We scarcely put that island astern when suddenly I saw smoke and heavy breakers, heard their booming thunder. The men were terrified, oar blades flew from their grip, clattering down to splash in the vessel's wash. She lay there, dead in the water, no hands to tug the blades that drove her on. But I strode down the decks to rouse my crewmen, halting beside each one with a bracing, winning word. Friends, we're hardly strangers at meeting danger, and this danger is no worse than what we faced when Cyclops penned us up in his vaulted cave, with crushing force. But even from there, my courage, my presence of mind, and tactics saved us all. And we will live to remember this someday, I have no doubt. Up now, follow my orders, all of us work as one. You men of the thwarts, lay on with your oars and strike the heaving swells, trusting that Zeus will pull us through these straits alive. You, helmsman, here's your order. Burn it in your mind. The steering oar of our rolling ship is in your hands. Keep her clear of that smoke and surging breakers. Head for those crags or she'll catch you off guard. She'll yaw over there. You'll plunge us all in ruin. So I shouted. They snapped to each command, no mention of Scylla, how to fight that nightmare. For fear the men would panic, desert their oars and huddle down and stow themselves away. But now I cleared my mind of Circe's orders, cramping my style, urging me not to arm at all. I donned my heroic armor, seized long spears in both my hands, and marched out on the half-deck, forward hoping from there to catch the first glimpse of Scylla, ghoul of the cliffs swooping to kill my men. But nowhere could I make her out, and my eyes ached, scanning that mist-bound rock face top to bottom. Now wailing in fear, we rowed on up those straits, Scylla to starboard, dreaded Charybdis off to port, her horrible whirlpool, gulping the sea surge down, but when she spewed it up like a cauldron over a raging fire, all her churning depths would seethe and heave, exploding spray showering down to splatter the peaks of both crags at once. But when she swallowed the sea surge down her gaping maw, the whole abyss lay bare, and the rocks around her roared, terrible, deafening. Bedrock showed down deep, boiling, black with sand, and ashen terror gripped the men. But now, fearing death, all eyes fixed on Charybdis. Now Scylla snatched 6 men from our hollow ship, the toughest, strongest hands I had, and glancing backward over the decks, searching for my crew, I could see their hands and feet already hoisted, flailing higher over my head. Look, wailing down at me, comrades riven in agony, shrieking out my name for one last time. Just as an angler poised on a jutting rock flings his treacherous bait in the offshore swell, whips his long rod, hook sheathed in an ox horn lure, and whisks up little fish he flips on the beach break, writhing, gasping out their lives. So now they writhed. Gasping as Scylla swung them up her cliff, and there at her cavern's mouth she bolted them down raw, screaming out, flinging their arms towards me, lost in that mortal struggle. Of all the pitiful things I'd had to witness, suffering, searching out the pathways of the sea, this wrenched my heart the most. But now, at last, putting the rocks, Scylla, and dread Charybdis far astern, we quickly reached the good green island of the sun, where Aeolus, Lord Hyperion, keeps his fine cattle, broad in the brow, and flocks of purebred sheep. Still aboard my black ship in the open sea, I could hear the lowing cattle driven home, the bleating sheep, and I was struck once more by the words of the blind Theban prophet Tiresias, and Aeaean Circe too. Time and again they told me to shun this island of the sun, the joy of man. So I warned my shipmates gravely, sick at heart, listen to me, my comrades, brothers in hardship, let me tell you the dire prophecies of Tiresias and Aeaean Circe too. Time and again they told me to shun this island of the sun, the joy of man. Here, they warned, the worst disaster awaits us. Row straight past these shores, race our black ship on. So I said, and the warnings broke their hearts. But Eurylochus waded in at once, with mutiny on his mind. You're a hard man, Odysseus, your fighting spirit stronger than ours. Your stamina never fails. You must be made of iron head to foot. Look, your crew's half dead with labor, starved for sleep. And you forbid us to set foot on land, this island here, washed by the waves where we might catch a decent meal again. Drained as we are, night falling fast, you'd have us desert this haven and blunder off into the mist-bound seas? Out of the night comes winds that shatter vessels. How can a man escape his headlong death if suddenly out of nowhere a cyclone hits, bred by the south or stormy west wind? They're the gales that tear a ship to splinters, the gods, our masters, willing or not, it seems. No, let's give way to the dark night, set out our supper here. Sit tight by our swift ship, then at daybreak, board and launch her, make for open sea. So Eurylochus urged, and shipmates cheered. Then I knew some power was brewing trouble for us, so I let fly with an anxious plea. Eurylochus, I'm one against all. The upper hand is yours. But swear me a binding oath, all here, that if we come on a herd of cattle or a fine flock of sheep, not one man among us, blind in his reckless ways, will slaughter an ox or ram. Just eat in peace, content with the food immortal Circe gave us. They quickly swore the oath that I required, and once they had vowed they'd never harm the herds, they moored our sturdy ship in the deep, narrow harbor, close to a fresh spring, and all hands disembarked and adeptly set about the evening meal. Once they put aside desire for food and drink, they recalled our dear companions, wept for the men that skill had plucked from the hollow ship and ate alive, and a welcome sleep came on them in their tears. But then, at the night's third watch, the stars just wheeling down, Zeus, who marshals the storm clouds, loosed a ripping wind, a howling demonic gale shrouding over the thunderheads, the earth and sea at once, and night swept down from the sky. When young Dawn, with her rose-red fingers, shone once more, we hauled our craft ashore, securing her in a vaulted cave where nymphs have lovely dancing rings and hold their sessions. There I called a muster, warning my shipmates yet again. Friends, we've food and drink aplenty aboard the ship. Keep your hands off all these herds, or we will pay the price. The cattle, the sleek flocks, belong to an awesome master, Aeolus, god of the sun who sees all, hears all things. So I warned, and my headstrong men complied. But for 1 whole month, the south wind blew nonstop. No other wind came up, none but the southeast. As long as our food and ruddy wine held out, the crew, eager to save their lives, kept their hands off the herds. But then, when supplies aboard had all run dry, when the men turned to hunting, forced to range for quarry with twisted hooks, for fish, birds, anything they could lay their hands on, hunger racked their bellies. I struck inland up the island, there to pray to the gods, if only one might show me some way home. Crossing into the heartland, clear of the crew, I rinsed my hands in a sheltered spot, a windbreak. But as soon as I prayed to all the gods who rule Olympus, down on my eyes they poured a sweet, sound sleep. As Eurylochus opened up his fatal plan to his friends, listen to me, my comrades, brother in hardship. All ways of dying are hateful to us poor mortals, true. But to die of hunger, starve to death, that's the worst of all. So up with you now, let's drive off the pick of Aeolus' sleek herds, slaughter them to the gods who rule the skies up there. If we ever make it home to Ithaca, native ground, erect at once a glorious temple to the sun god, line the walls with hordes of dazzling gifts. But if the sun, inflamed for his long-horned cattle, means to wreck our ship and the other gods pitch in, I'd rather die at sea, with one deep gulp of death, than die by inches on this desolate island here. So he urged, and the shipmates cheered again. At once they drove off the sun god's finest cattle, close at hand. Not far from the blue proud ship they grazed, those splendid beasts with their broad brows and curving horns. Surrounding them in a ring, they lifted their prayers to the gods, plucking fresh green leaves from a tall oak for the rite, since white strewing barley was long gone in the ship. Once they'd prayed, slaughtered, and skinned the cattle, they cut the thigh bones out, they wrapped them round in fat, a double-fold sliced clean and topped with strips of flesh. And since they had no wine to anoint the glowing victims, they made libations with water, broiling all the innards, and once they'd burned the bones and tasted the organs, hacked the rest into pieces, piercing them with spits. That moment soothing slumber fell from my eyes, and down I went to our ship at the water's edge, but on my way nearing the long-beaked craft, the smoky savor of roasts came floating up around me. I groaned in anguish, crying to the deathless gods, Father Zeus, the rest of you blissful gods who never die, you with your fatal sleep, you lulled me into disaster. Left on their own, look what a monstrous thing my crew concocted. Quick as a flash with their flaring robes, Lampede sped the news to the sun on high that we had killed his herds, and Helios burst out in rage to all the immortals. Father Zeus, the rest of you blissful gods who never die, punish them all. The crew of Laertes' son Odysseus, what an outrage. They killed my cattle. The great joy of my heart, day in, day out, when I climbed the starry skies and when I wheeled back down from the heights to touch the earth once more. Unless they pay me back in blood for the butchery of my herds, down I go to the house of death and blaze among the dead. But Zeus, who marshals the thunderheads, insisted, Son, You keep shining among the deathless gods and mortal men across the good green earth. And as for the guilty ones, why, soon enough, on the wine-dark sea, I'll hit the racing ship with a white-hot bolt. I'll tear it into splinters. Or so I heard from the lovely nymph Calypso, who heard it herself, she said, from Hermes, god of guides. And as soon as I reached our ship at the water's edge, I took the men to task, upbraiding each in turn. But how to set things right, we couldn't find a way. The cattle were dead already. And the gods soon showed us all some fateful signs. The hides began to crawl, the meat, both raw and roasted, bellowed out on the spits, and we heard a noise like the moan of lowing oxen. Yet 6 more days my eager companions feasted on the cattle of the sun, the pick of the herds they'd driven off, but then, when Cronian Zeus brought on the 7th day, the wind in its ceaseless raging dropped at last, and stepping the mast at once, hoisting the white sail, we boarded ship and launched her, made for open sea. But once we'd left that island in our wake, no land at all in sight, nothing but sea and sky. Then Zeus, the son of Cronos, mounted a thunderhead above our hollow ship, and deep went black beneath it. Nor did the craft scud on much longer. All of a sudden, killer squalls attacked us, screaming out of the west. A murderous blast, shearing the 2 forestays off so the mast toppled backward, its running tackle spilling into the bilge. The mast itself went crashing into the stern. It struck the helmsman's head and crushed his skull to pulp, and down from his deck the man flipped like a diver. His hardy life spirit left his bones behind. Then in the same breath, Zeus hit the craft with a lightning bolt and thunder. Round she spun, reeling under the impact, filled with reeking brimstone, shipmates pitching out of her, bobbing around like sea hawks, swept along by the whitecaps past the trim black hull, and the god cut short their journey home forever. But I went lurching along our battered hulk till the sea surge ripped the plankings from the keel, and the waves swirled it away, stripped bare and snapped the mast from the decks. But a backstay made of bull's hide still held fast, and with this I lashed the mast and keel together and made them one, righting my makeshift raft as the wretched gale winds bore me on and on. At last the west wind quit its wild rage, and the south came back on at once to hound me even more, making me double back my route toward cruel Charybdis. All night long I was rushed back, and then at break of day I reached the crag of Scylla and dire Charybdis' vortex, right when the dreadful whirlpool gulped the salt sea down. But heaving myself aloft to clutch at the fig tree's height, like a bat I clung to its trunk for dear life. Not a chance for a good firm foothold there, no clambering up it either. The roots too far to reach, the boughs too high overhead, huge swaying branches that overshadowed Charybdis. But I held on, dead set, waiting for her to vomit my mast and keel back up again. Oh, how I ached for both, and back they came, late, but at last, at just the hour a judge at court, who settled the countless suits of brash young claimants, rises, the day's work done, and turns home for supper. That's when the timbers reared back up from Charybdis. I let go. I plunged with my hands and feet flailing, crashing into the waves beside those great beams, and scrambling aboard them fast. I rowed hard with my hands right through the straits. And the Father of men and gods did not let Scylla see me, else I'd have died on the spot. No escape from death. I drifted along 9 days. On the 10th at night, the gods cast me up on Ogygia, Calypso's island, home of the dangerous nymph with glossy braids, who speaks with human voice, and she took me in, and she loved me. Why cover the same ground again? Just yesterday, here at hall, I told you all the rest, you and your gracious wife. It goes against my grain to repeat a tale told once, and told so clearly.